we go beyond the stats. Our stories are quoted the world over.
At WION, sport is part of our DNA. Come, join us on this journey. Weekdays 6:30 p.m. IST, 1 p.m. GMT.
Hello and welcome. I'm Ananya Datta and I'm back with another edition of Race to Power. Here's what we have lined up and you can expect in the next 30 minutes. The NDA bloc is back in power in India. Yes, the BJP is heading it and the big four ministries are in its pockets. But why are experts saying that this term will be different than before? We decode the upcoming challenges. France is looking at an interesting election season. We speak to an expert to know what lies ahead for Emmanuel Macron. Days after India's Lok Sabha elections concluded, leaders across political parties have subsequently begun the process of travelling to their respective constituencies to thank the voters and their party workers. In the latest, Congress leaders Rahul Gandhi and Priyanka Gandhi have reached Uttar Pradesh's Rai Bareli, where they addressed party members, workers and voters.
पहली बार मैंने देखा कि इंडिया गठबंधन अलग अलग पार्टियां, कांग्रेस का हर कार्यकर्ता, समाजवादी पार्टी का हर कार्यकर्ता, डीएमके का हर कार्यकर्ता एक साथ खड़े होकर लड़ गए। उत्तर प्रदेश की जनता ने नफरत के खिलाफ, हिंसा के खिलाफ, अहंकार के खिलाफ दबाकर वोट किया है।
Rahul Gandhi registered a victory from not one but two seats in the recently concluded general elections. He won from both Uttar Pradesh's Rai Bareli and Kerala's Wayanad constituency with a significant margin. The Congress sibling duo is expected to visit Wayanad next, amid speculations that Rahul Gandhi might relinquish the seat and represent UP's Rai Bareli this time as a member of parliament. On the other hand, Prime Minister Narendra Modi, who won from Varanasi constituency, is expected to visit the holy city next week to address and thank voters and party workers as well. While the BJP, despite falling short of the majority mark, formed the government for a third historic term after securing support from allies, RSS chief Mohan Bhagwat issued his first public remarks following the poll results. In a candid message, the right-wing leader has raised concerns over decorum not being maintained during elections. Bhagwat said, and I'm quoting here, that a true sevak or a worker is someone who is not arrogant and maintains dignity in the work done.
उस मर्यादा का पालन करके जो चलता है वो कर्म करता है, लेकिन कर्मों में लिप्त नहीं होता, उसमें अहंकार नहीं आता कि मैंने किया, और वही सेवक कहलाने का अधिकारी रहता है।
Nirmala Sitharaman has been reappointed as India's finance minister in Prime Minister Narendra Modi's new coalition government. Despite the Bharatiya Janata Party failing to secure a majority in the recent elections, key portfolios have remained with Modi's party. Sitharaman, who will also oversee the Corporate Affairs Ministry, faces the challenge of balancing fiscal demands within the new coalition framework. Economists suggest that increased government spending may be necessary to maintain support, potentially marking a shift from the previous conservative fiscal approach. The fiscal landscape looks promising with a recent surge in tax revenue and a record $25 billion dividend payout from the central bank. Additionally, S&P Global Ratings has hinted at a possible credit ratings upgrade, reflecting India's improved fiscal position. The economy, one of the fastest growing major economies in the world, expanded by over 8% in the last fiscal year, with the central bank projecting a 7.2% growth for the current year. Despite these positive indicators, unemployment and the increasing cost of living have emerged as critical concerns for voters, impacting the BJP support at the polls. Looking ahead, the Modi government will face crucial state elections in Maharashtra, Haryana and Delhi. This political context may drive the government to implement measures targeting the poor, women and youth to garner support. Nirmala Sitharaman has previously focused on infrastructure spending and reducing the fiscal deficit. Experts predict that the upcoming budget will highlight increased allocation towards rural development and housing, ensuring fiscal discipline is maintained. Let's focus now. France is heading towards an interesting election season. Emmanuel Macron is banking on his traditional support, hoping for a majority. But the far-right parties are confident of an EU election repeat.
Voters in France have been given about 20 days to choose their government. The shock defeat in the EU parliamentary elections prompted Emmanuel Macron to call for snap elections. But it's a roll of the dice on his political future and could offer the far right a shot at real power. Macron's stature has been diminished since he lost his absolute majority in the parliament 2 years ago. Discussing the snap election call, a source of Reuters says there was a chance he could win back a majority by taking everyone by surprise. But they added that if Marine Le Pen's far-right national rally does take over, the gamble is that the next 3 years would demonstrate their incompetence to voters and undermine their bid for the presidency in 2027. That option, the source said, is not without risk. The vote is likely to revolve around discontent with Macron's style of power, cost of living and immigration policies. But it will also be about whether the RN can be trusted to run a major European government.
We are ready to govern. We have a number of texts and bills which are obviously ready to come into force. In the context of a coalition government, we obviously cannot do everything that the presidency of the Republic allows us to do. But we can do things for purchasing power, for security, for immigration. I am calling on other political groups by offering to work with me within the framework of a government of national unity.
Among policies put forward by the RN, the party has proposed high public spending despite already significant debt levels. It also wants to expel more migrants, restrict childcare benefits to French citizens, and give French nationals preference in access to social housing and jobs. There is no certainty the RN will end up with enough seats to run the government. Other scenarios include a wide-ranging coalition of mainstream parties. The leader of France's conservative Republicans has called for an alliance.
I ensured that the Republicans had a voice and continued to have a very strong voice. But today, LR is too weak to oppose the two blocs which are the most dangerous. So we need an alliance, remaining true to ourselves, avoiding the danger of fronts unbowed, who could soon have a majority in the National Assembly. So we need an alliance.
But even if the RN and its coalition did score a majority, Macron would remain president for 3 more years. That means still in charge of defense and foreign policy. But he would lose the power to set the domestic agenda. political parties in France don't have long to prepare. The election will take place in 2 rounds on June 30th and July 7th. The next government will take over in July. Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
Let's now zoom out and look at the bigger picture, the EU elections. It has been 2 days since elections for the European Union Parliament took place, and while only 12 of 27 countries have finished counting as of now, preliminary results have revealed a shift towards the right. As final results are still awaited, leaders across political groups in the European Parliament held a meeting on Tuesday, the first since elections concluded on June 9th. At the moment, European People's Party has won a majority number of seats. This, however, is not the final tally. The EPP is an umbrella alliance of over 83 political parties across countries. As results continue to trickle in, let's take a look at some interesting faces that have emerged victorious and will potentially be members of the European Parliament. First up is Filip Turek of the Czech Republic's Motorist Party. Now, Turek is a car collector and former motor racer whose party defends the right of drivers against EU climate policies. The Motorist Party, in alliance with Protest Party Oath, have together come third in the EU elections with 10.3%. Next up, we have Germany's Carola Rackete, a 35-year-old sailor, activist and ecologist. Rackete has been touted as one of the most prominent new faces in European Parliament for the upcoming term. Rackete was the joint lead candidate of Germany's Left Party for the just concluded EU elections. Third on the line is Italian Army General Roberto Vannucci. The former paratrooper commander stirred up a controversy just last year after he published a book that belittled members of the LGBTQ+ community, migrants, minorities and feminists. His opinion, however, earned him a place in the far-right political circles of Italy and paved the way for him becoming right-wing populist party, the League's candidate. Next up is Grzegorz Braun, a Polish leader from the far-right Confederation Party. Now, Braun triggered global outrage just last year after he took a fire extinguisher from a wall in the lobby of the parliament to put out candles lit as part of a Hanukkah celebrations. The far-right leader has also been vocal of his pro-Russia stance amid the ongoing war with Ukraine. Last on the list is Spain's Alves Perez. An influencer with massive following among young male voters, Perez, who has almost 1 million followers on Instagram and over 500,000 on Telegram, had promised to renounce his salary as an MEP if he was elected. The far-right activist who leads the party's Over movement has garnered about 800,000 votes and 3 seats in the European Parliament.
This is our last formal Conference of Presidents meeting.
All right, now to take this conversation further, we are being joined by James Jackson, a journalist and political analyst from Berlin. Mr. Jackson, good to have you on WION. Let's talk about France, the elections that's coming up this June 30th. Do you think it's a referendum on Emmanuel Macron or more of a referendum on the voters who are seeming to be turning right this time in the European Union?
I think what this is really is doubling down and quite a dangerous gamble for Emmanuel Macron, who perhaps wants to make it a gamble on a referendum on democracy and on the French firewall against the far right. But I think it may turn out to be a vote on Emmanuel Macron himself with low approval ratings. I think this is, many analysts are saying this is very dangerous and not a very good idea at all.
Since you say it's not a good idea, then why is Macron pushing for it?
If you look to France's southern neighbour, Spain, what happened? Pedro Sanchez called an early election, the Prime Minister of Spain, when the right wing were ahead in the polls. But Sanchez is a relatively popular incumbent, although he's had some scandals and some difficulties with legislature. And he managed to win that. He ran a very successful campaign against quite a weak leader, Feijó. So I think he saw Sanchez's luck. He's decided to effectively call the bluff of the electorate who have voted for the far right. Almost over 30% of them voted for the Rassemblement National of Marine Le Pen. So he seems to have think that they're not going to do that in a legislative election, or perhaps he's happy to lose seats in the legislature to the far right to prove that they're not ready for government, because Le Pen's protégé, Jordan Bardella, is quite seen as by Macron's team as quite an extreme figure, but actually a lot of people in France seem to like him. So I think it's really a big gamble by Macron, who thinks that the centre will hold and France's democracy will win out against the far right. But it's entirely possible that France's voters want the far right and that this is going to be an opportunity. So, some people, I'm joining you from Berlin, and some people have compared this even to Hindenburg's move in 1932 to let the far right National Socialists into power, to sort of see what they're like in government, to moderate them a bit. But you never know what's going to happen. We don't know what's going to happen with this election. We don't know what's going to happen if the far right get into power.
Absolutely, Mr. Jackson. Seems to be a lot of uncertainty across the European Union, not just in France. Thank you so much for joining us here on WION and getting us your insights.
Thanks for having me.
All right, now in about 3 weeks from now, the United Kingdom is going to polls. Voters did not have much time to prepare. The Prime Minister called for early elections within 43 days. There was criticism from within the Tory party and beyond. And this criticism is now turning into numbers. The JL partners have published a new popularity poll. It reveals that support among Rishi Sunak's voter base fell to 8 points from 20 points on June 8th. This is right after the Prime Minister's controversial early exit from the D-Day commemorations in Normandy. The decline is a 12 percentage point fall within a week. A separate poll shows that only 40% of those who voted for the Tories in 2019 plan on voting again for the party this time. Under these abysmal numbers, the Tories have unveiled their election manifesto. It did not have any surprises. Everything was on expected lines. Sunak is promising further tax cuts, aid for first-time home buyers, and experts say that Conservatives are aiming to please their core vote bank because the policies have failed to dent the Labour voter base, at least so far. And when it comes to the right side of the political spectrum, Reform UK party is making its late entry felt. Nigel Farage has termed the upcoming polls as quote-unquote immigration election, and the narrative is working. The gap created by the Tories is assisting the newest candidate to make gains. Farage is now more popular than Sunak in the United Kingdom. This is the first time this has happened. His ratings have risen from 12 to 15 points. Overall, Labour have maintained their commanding position. Keir Starmer continues to lead by 17 points, and unlike usual elections where the gap between Labour and Tories reduced with elections approaching, Starmer has managed to reduce the gap day in and day out. Let's talk about South Africa now. The country's political landscape is replete with twists and turns. The country's newly elected parliament is scheduled to convene on Friday, but it seems the ANC-led unity government might face a few hurdles in doing so. In the latest developments, the MK party, led by former South African president and once ANC leader Jacob Zuma, has filed an application in the Constitutional Court to try and block the first National Assembly sitting. Zuma's party came third in the May 29th elections, but has alleged vote rigging and also threatened to boycott the new parliament. The election saw African National Congress lose significant ground after being at the helm of power in the country for 30 long years. ANC lost parliamentary majority for the very first time in 3 decades, forcing the party to now negotiate with potential partners across party lines and ideologies in order to form a national unity government. Our correspondent Kalden Omu has more on this from Johannesburg.
time is ticking for South African political parties to form a government. This after none received a majority of seats. Chief Justice Raymond Zondo has announced that the new parliament will convene on Friday to elect the Speaker, Deputy Speaker and the President. The ANC, which still remains the country's largest party, announced that forming a government of national unity is the best option in order to move the country forward. But not everyone has applauded the idea. Meanwhile, the new party, Umkhonto we Sizwe, led by former President Jacob Zuma, has filed an application in the Constitutional Court to block the first parliamentary sitting. The party alleges election fraud and rigging and has requested the Election Commission to address the issue. MK has also said the members will not attend the first parliamentary sitting as a form of protest. This is Kalden Omar from Johannesburg, South Africa. For WION, World is One.
Let's go across to the United States now, where the incumbent president and vice president are pulling all the stops to woo a certain demographic that might hold the power over who wins the November 5th presidential race. Just on Monday, US President Joe Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris held a concert in the White House to mark the annual Juneteenth holiday. Officially commemorating on June 19th, Juneteenth celebrates the end of slavery in the United States in 1865.
One of those soldiers of the Red Ball Express who fought for freedom on distant shores was a civil rights lawyer who fought for freedom here at home. 61 years ago this week, he was gunned down at home in Mississippi in the poison of white supremacy. But all these years later, his spirit endures. You all know his name. It was Medgar Evers. Last month, I awarded Medgar Evers the Presidential Medal of Freedom, our nation's highest civilian honor, posthumously. Because life reminds us of our change that we have to keep in redeeming the soul of America.
This Juneteenth, we will hold a National Day of Action on Voting. And I call on all the leaders here to please join us in helping more Americans register to vote. Because while Juneteenth is a day for celebration, it is also a day for dedication, a day to rededicate ourselves to the ongoing and unfinished work of our American experiment, a day to renew our commitment to defend our freedoms, to honor our history, and to continue to fight for the promise of America.
Biden credited the country's African-American vote bank for his victory in 2020. In 2021, the Democrat leader signed a law to make Juneteenth a federal holiday. But given that U.S. voters will witness a Biden-Trump rematch in November, the old political rivals making a comeback has negatively impacted voter enthusiasm in the United States. It remains to be seen if America's black community will rally its support behind Biden again, or will a part of the vote bank switch sides this time? And with that, we are wrapping up this edition of Race to Power. Thanks for watching with me, Ananya Datta. Goodbye.
Everyone loves a contest. But sport isn't just about victory and defeat. When the GOATs in sport speak, you hear it first on WION.
You have to play good cricket over a period of time. I actually pushed myself right out of the damn tournament.
We go beyond the stats. Our stories are quoted the world over.
At WION, sport is part of our DNA. Come, join us on this journey. Weekdays 6:30 p.m. IST, 1 p.m. GMT.
Namaste. Hello, friends. We did Dr. Subhash Chandra show, popularly known as DSC show, for 4 years, from August 2014 to August 2018. 28 states of Bharat. Of course, we reached out to all of you in 190 countries across the world. The show was very successful. Each episode was being watched by almost 25 million people every week. For past 6 years, the demand of the show has never died down. People write to us, people ask for the show to start again. Hence, we are beginning the show once again on All Z Network, also on WION, which is the global network channel from India. Again, thank you for your love and affection. See you soon at Subhash Chandra Show.
Economic turmoil and global unrest have cast a shadow over President Joe Biden's approval ratings.
The rockets are continuing to be fired by Hamas in Gaza, although at a slower rate than previously.
So, right now, we are with the volunteers from the Aleppo municipality. They are still